The man in worn-out clothes, the man who walked into Ebbiano's supermarket that Thursday evening, looked like he had just crawled out of a gutter. His trousers were brown corduroy, faded at the knees and shiny with age, the fabric thinning in places where countless washes had worn it down to nearly nothing. The hem at the back had come undone, dragging slightly against the polished floor as he walked. His shirt, once white, had turned the color of weak tea, with sweat stains darkening the underarms and a small hole near the collar that he hadn't bothered to mend. On his feet were black leather sandals, scuffed beyond redemption, the soles worn thin on the outer edges from years of walking. One of the straps was held together by a piece of black thread, crudely stitched. He moved with the slow, deliberate gait of someone whose bones had begun to complain about the years. There was a slight stoop to his shoulders, a carefulness in how he placed each foot, as if the ground beneath him could not be entirely trusted. His gray hair was thinning at the crown, disheveled in a way that suggested he had either forgotten to comb it or simply no longer cared. His skin, the color of dark honey, bore the deep lines of a man who had lived many years, lines around his eyes, deep furrows across his forehead, creases running from the sides of his nose to the corners of his mouth. In his hand he carried a small plastic bag, the cheap translucent kind that market women sell in bundles of 50. It was empty, flapping slightly against his leg as he walked. Nobody looked at him twice. In Abuya, appearances were currency, and this man was clearly bankrupt in that department. The woman arranging her trolley near the entrance glanced at him and quickly looked away, her eyes sliding over him as if he were invisible. The security guard by the door, a young man in a navy blue uniform who usually greeted every customer with a cheerful "You are welcome, ma sir," said nothing as the old man passed. He simply stood there, hands clasped behind his back, watching the car park as if the old man did not exist. The man seemed accustomed to this. He did not expect greetings. He did not look for them. He simply walked into the supermarket, his eyes adjusting to the harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. The air inside was cold, too cold, really, the air conditioning set to a temperature that made the place feel like a walk-in freezer. The old man shivered slightly, rubbing his arms as he reached for a shopping basket from the stack near the entrance. The baskets were bright yellow, made of durable plastic, with "Shop at Ebbiano" printed on the side in bold red letters. He took one and began to walk slowly down the aisles. Kaidinma watched him from her till. She had been working at Ebbiano for 8 months now, ever since her father died and her mother's groundnut business could no longer cover both feeding and school fees. The job had come through a church member who knew the supermarket manager, and Kaidinma had grabbed it with both hands, grateful for anything that would keep her in school. She was 22 years old, the first of 4 children, and the weight of her family's expectations rested squarely on her shoulders. Her father had always said she would be the one to lift them out of poverty. She was the clever one, the one with the shining results, the one who had gained admission to study business administration at the National Open University of Nigeria. He had been so proud, so proud. Then the coughing started, then the diagnosis, then the funeral. That was 2 years ago, and Kaidinma still felt the grief like a stone in her chest, heavy and immovable. But she could not afford to stop moving, so she worked 8 months at Ebbiano, combining afternoon and evening shifts with her correspondence studies. The pay was modest, 25,000 naira a month, barely enough to cover her transport, her feeding, and the small amounts she sent home to her mother in Enugu, but it kept her in school, and that was all that mattered. On this particular Thursday evening, Kaidinma was tired. Her feet ached from standing for 6 hours straight. Her head throbbed from the constant beep of the scanner and the endless stream of customers. But she kept her smile in place because that was what the job required. Smile at the customers, ask if they found everything they needed, bag their items carefully, thank them for coming, repeat. She watched the old man as he shuffled through the aisles. He moved slowly, squinting at prices, picking up items and examining them before putting them back on the shelf. He was clearly someone who counted his money carefully, someone for whom every naira mattered, probably a pensioner, Kaidinma thought, or a retired civil servant, whose savings have run dry. There were many such people in Abuya, old men and women who had worked all their lives only to find that their pensions could not keep up with the rising cost of living. They came to Ebiano to buy the cheapest things, the essentials, the items that would stretch their meager income just a little further. Kaidinma's heart went out to them. She knew what it was like to count every kobo, to calculate and recalculate before reaching the counter, to pray that the total would not exceed what you had in your pocket. The old man continued his slow progress through the aisles. He paused at the bread section, picking up a loaf of the cheapest brand aged bread, soft and white, wrapped in simple plastic. He examined it, squeezed it gently to check its freshness, then placed it in his basket. Next, he moved to the beverages aisle, reaching for a small tin of Milo, not the large family size, but the smallest one, the kind that would last a week if used sparingly. Then a carton of peak milk, the sachets rather than the tin, because sachets were cheaper. Then Indomie noodles for sachets, the plain chicken flavor, nothing fancy. Finally, a bar of Dettol soap, the large size, which would serve for both body and laundry if necessary. Basic things, survival things. Kaidinma watched him approach her counter, his basket held in both hands like an offering. He placed it on the conveyor belt carefully, almost reverently, as if the items inside were precious. Then he looked up and their eyes met. "Good evening, sir," Kaidinma said, her smile genuine despite her exhaustion. The old man blinked as if surprised to be addressed directly. Then his face softened and he smiled back a warm smile, unexpected from someone who looked so worn down by life. "Good evening, my daughter," he replied. His voice was deep, with an IGBO accent she recognized from home, the rolling consonants, the gentle rise and fall of the tones. Something in it made her look at his face properly, beyond the shabby clothes and unkempt hair. He had kind eyes, set deep in a face weathered by time, but there was something else there too, something she couldn't quite name, a steadiness, a calmness, the look of someone who had seen many things and had made peace with most of them. His hands, she noticed, were clean and well kept. The nails were trimmed, the cuticles neat, the skin smooth despite the veins that stood out with age. They were not the hands of a man who did manual labor. They were the hands of someone who had spent his life behind a desk, or perhaps in a position where hands were noticed. The thought flickered through Kaidinma's mind and was gone. She picked up the first item, the loaf of bread, and scanned it. "Bread, 950 naira," she said. The old man nodded. "Yes, my daughter." She scanned the Milo. "Milo, small tin, 2,300. Another nod. She worked her way through the rest of the items, the milk sachets, the Indomie, the Dettol soap. Each scan produced a beep, a price, a small addition to the total on the screen. When she finished, she looked at the display. "Your total is 12,350 naira, sir." The old man smiled and reached into his back pocket. And that was when everything changed. The wallet a simple purchase, the old man's hand disappeared into his back pocket with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly what he would find there. His fingers patted the fabric once, twice, a habitual gesture, the kind of automatic movement people make when reaching for something. That has always been there, but his hand came out empty. He frowned slightly, a small crease appearing between his brows. Perhaps he had imagined it. Perhaps he had put the wallet in a different pocket. He reached into his other back pocket, his movements still unhurried, still untroubled, empty. The frown deepened. He tried his front pockets, first the right, then the left. Nothing. His chest pocket, the one place he rarely used, also yielded nothing. He patted his shirt, his trousers, even the small pocket on the side of his right leg that most people forgot existed. Empty, empty, empty. The calm on his face began to crack, replaced by something frantic, something small and lost. His breathing quickened. He patted himself again, more urgently this time, as if the wallet might have magically reappeared if he'd just searched hard enough. He looked down at the floor around his feet, then back at the pockets he had already checked, then at the floor again. I had it," he stammered, his voice thin and reedy. "My wallet. I had it when I came in. I remember putting it in my pocket. I remember." He stopped, trying to retrace his steps in his mind. "I took it out at the gate to show the guard my old age card for the discount. I showed him and I put it back. I put it back in my pocket." "I know I did." His hands were shaking now, trembling as they patted his pockets one more time, desperately, hopelessly. Please, he said, looking at Kaidinma with eyes that had suddenly become wet. Please, my daughter. I had it. I'm not a thief. I'm not trying to cheat you. I had money. I had my wallet. Kaidinma's heart clenched. She had seen this before: old people, confused people, people whose minds were not what they used to be. But this man did not seem confused. He seemed genuinely panicked, genuinely devastated, as if losing that wallet meant losing something more than just money. I believe you, sir, she said gently. Maybe it fell out somewhere. Maybe you dropped it while you were shopping. We can check behind her. A throat was cleared loudly. Kaidinma looked up. The queue behind the old man had grown while she was focused on his predicament. For people now stood in line, their expressions ranging from mildly annoyed to openly hostile. At the front of the line stood a woman who looked like she had just stepped out of a wedding magazine. Her jewel was an architectural marvel of burgundy lace, tied high and proud above a face that was already arranged in an expression of supreme irritation. Her iroh and buba were made of the finest Aso oak, heavy with embroidery, and her jewelry, real gold by the look of it, glinted under the fluorescent lights. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, the movement sending ripples through her expensive fabric, and sighed with the theatricality of someone who wanted everyone within earshot to know that her time was being wasted. Behind her stood a man in a banker's suit, navy blue, well-tailored, with a crimson tie that screamed, "I am important." He kept checking his watch, a chunky silver thing that probably cost more than Kaidinma's monthly salary. Every few seconds he would glance at it, then at the old man, then at the ceiling, as if appealing to God to deliver him from this inconvenience. Behind the banker, two women in corporate wear exchanged knowing looks and rolled their eyes in unison. "Oga," the banker said, his voice dripping with impatience. "Abi make you find your wallet quick, quick. Some of us have places to be, some of us have meetings, some of us don't have the luxury of standing here all evening while you search your pockets like a madman." The old man flinched as if he had been struck. His shoulders hunched further, curling inward as if to make himself smaller, less visible. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm very sorry. I'll step aside. I need to find my wallet. I need to." "Step aside?" The woman in jail interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Step aside? You should just leave. You obviously cannot afford these things. Look at you. Look at the way you are dressed. You come to Ebbiano with your worn-out clothes and your empty pockets, wasting our time like this. Do you know how much my time is worth? Do you know what I could be doing instead of standing here behind a useless old man who cannot even pay for a loaf of bread?" The words hung in the air like poison. Kaidinma felt her face grow hot. She wanted to say something to defend this man, to tell the woman that poverty was not a crime and that old age deserved respect, not cruelty, but her voice was stuck in her throat. She was just a cashier, just a temporary worker, just a girl from the village who had no right to speak to customers, especially customers who looked as wealthy and powerful as this woman. The old man said nothing. He simply stood there, absorbing the woman's words like rain on parched ground, his eyes fixed on the conveyor belt where his few possessions sat: bread, Milo, milk, noodles, soap, the essentials of a life reduced to its barest minimum. Slowly, with trembling hands, he began to gather his items. He reached for the bread first, his fingers closing around the soft plastic wrapper, then the Milo, then the milk sachets. One by one, he collected them, placing them back in his yellow basket with the care of someone handling precious things. Kaidinma watched him, her heart breaking. The man in the banker's suit checked his watch again. Finally, he muttered, "Common sense prevail." The woman in jail sniffed, adjusting her wrapper with a sharp flick of her wrist. "Next time, check your pocket before you queue. Some of us are tired of wasting time behind wait." The word came out of Kaidinma's mouth before she knew she had spoken it. It hung in the air, small but clear, cutting through the woman's complaint. Like a knife through palm oil, everyone froze. The old man looked up, his eyes red-rimmed, his hands still clutching the basket. The woman in jail stared at Kaidinma as if she had just sprouted a second head. The banker raised an eyebrow. Kaidinma's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. What was she doing? What was she about to do? She should keep quiet. She should mind her business. She should. But she was already reaching for her bag. It was a small bag, black fox leather, tucked under the counter beside her feet. She pulled it out and unzipped it with fingers that trembled slightly. Inside was her purse, a worn brown thing that had once belonged to her mother. She opened it and looked at the contents: her transport fare home, 500 naira, her feeding money for the week, 2,000 naira. The little she had managed to save toward next semester's registration, 10,000 naira, total 12,500 naira, everything she had in the world. Kaidinma looked at the money. She looked at the old man. She thought about her father, who had died in a hospital because they couldn't afford the surgery he needed. She thought about the way people had treated her family afterward, the pitying looks, the whispered comments, the casual cruelty of those who had never known what it was. Like to Count Kobo, she thought about how easy it would be to do nothing, to let the old man leave, to forget about him by the end of the night. Then she thought about his eyes, the way they had lit up when she said, "Good evening, sir," the way he had called her my daughter, the way he had thanked her for simply doing her job. She counted the notes quickly, 12,500 naira, and pulled them out of her purse. "Chidi, what are you doing?" The whisper came from Funmi, the cashier at the next till. Funmi was older than Kaidinma, a mother of 3 from Ogun State who had been working at Ebiano for 5 years. She had seen everything: thieves, liars, cheats, and scammers of every description. She had also seen kindness exploited, generosity taken advantage of, good hearts broken by bad people. "Chidi, that's your money," Oh Funmi whispered urgently, her eyes wide with alarm. "You don't even know this man. He could be anybody. He could be a scammer. He could be pretending. These old men, they have all kinds of tricks. Don't let your heart finish you in this place." Kaidinma heard the words, but they seemed to come from far away, from somewhere outside the bubble that had formed around her and the old man. She ignored them. She ignored the banker's impatient tapping. She ignored the woman in Jelly's contemptuous stare. She held out the money. "I'm paying for you, sir," the old man stared at the notes in her hand as if she had offered him a live snake. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No sound came out. "No," he finally managed, his voice cracked and broken. "No, no, my daughter. I cannot take your money. I cannot. This is too much. This is," he looked at the notes, then at her face, then back at the notes. "This is everything you have. I can see it. I can see it in your eyes. This is your money, your own money. I cannot take it." "Sir," Kaidinma said gently, "the people are waiting. Just take it. You can pay me back another time." But they both knew this was a lie. She didn't know him. She would never see him again. The money was gone, sacrificed on the altar of a stranger's need, and there would be no repayment, no reward, no happy ending, just an empty purse and a long walk home because she no longer had transport fare. The old man looked at her for a long moment. His eyes moved across her face, her young face, her tired face, her face that held the weight of responsibilities no 22-year-old should have to carry. He saw the cheap uniform she wore, the same one all the cashiers wore, but on her it was neatly pressed, carefully maintained, a small act of dignity in a job that offered little of it. He saw the way she clutched her empty purse, not with regret but with finality, as if she had already made peace with what she had done. And something in his own face changed. The panic faded, the desperation eased. In their place came something else, a deep and profound emotion that Kaidinma could not quite name. Gratitude, yes, but also wonder, also the look of a man who had just witnessed something he had long feared was extinct in the world. "God will bless you, my daughter," he said quietly. "God will bless you abundantly, what you have done today. You do not know what you have done, but God knows, and I know, and one day you will know too." He took the money from her hand, his fingers brushing against hers. They were warm despite everything and steady now. He paid for his items: bread, Milo, milk, noodles, soap, and gathered them carefully into his plastic bag. At the door, he turned and looked at her once more, his eyes holding hers across the length of the supermarket. Then he was gone. The woman in jail stepped forward, her expression now slightly less certain, as if she had witnessed something that had unsettled her without her fully understanding why. She placed her expensive items on the conveyor belt: imported wine, Belgian chocolates, French cheese, and did not meet Kaidinma's eyes. The banker paid for his single bottle of energy drink and left without a word. One by one, the customers came and went, and Kaidinma served them all with the same smile, the same efficiency, the same gentle thank you, please come again. But inside, something had shifted. She had given away everything she had, and strangely, impossibly, she did not regret it. Later, during her break, Funmi found her in the staff canteen, eating a small piece of bread she had bought with the last 50 naira in her purse. You are too foolish, Funmi said, but her voice was softer now, less angry. She sat down across from Kaidinma and shook her head slowly. That was your school money, your transport money, your everything. You think that man will come back? You think he will remember you? Chidi, your heart will finish you in this Lagos, Abuya, Kaidinma corrected automatically, but a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Abuya, Lagos, same thing, Funmi waved her hand. The point is you have done something very stupid, very, very stupid, and I am saying this as your friend, as someone who likes you. That man is gone, you will never see him again, and next semester when your school fees are due, you will remember this day and you will cry. Kaidinma took another bite of her bread and said nothing. Because Funmi was right, she knew Funmi was right. The practical part of her, the part that had learned to survive in a world that offered no favors, knew that she had made a mistake, a costly mistake, a foolish mistake, but another part of her, the part that remembered her father's kindness, her mother's sacrifice, the small acts of generosity that had kept her family going through the worst of times, that part of her was quiet and still and at peace. She had done the right thing. Even if it cost her everything, even if no one ever knew, even if the old man never came back, she had done the right thing, and somehow, in some way she could not explain, that was enough. The evening continued, customers came and went, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Kaidinma scanned item after item, smiled smile after smile, and tried not to think about the empty space in her purse where her savings used to be. By closing time, she had pushed the incident to the back of her mind. It was a memory now, filed away with all the other small kindnesses and small cruelties that made up a day at Ebiano supermarket. At 9 p.m., she began her closing duties. She wiped down the counters, removed the till, counted her float. She arranged the impulse buy items at the front, chewing gum, sweets, small sachets of painkillers. She checked expiry dates on the shelves in her section, pulling out anything that needed to be returned to the stockroom. Then, because Funmi had already left and the other cashiers were busy with their own sections, she began to walk through the aisles, arranging scattered products, picking up items that customers had abandoned in the wrong places. The supermarket was quiet now, the fluorescent lights humming their familiar tune, the air still cold, the silence broken only by the soft squeak of her flat-soled shoes on the polished floor. She was in the third aisle, the one with household cleaning products, when her foot connected with something under the bottom shelf. It was a soft impact, the kind that sends an object skittering forward a few inches. Kaidinma looked down. A wallet, brown leather, worn at the edges, lying on its side as if it had been kicked there and forgotten. Kaidinma bent down and picked it up. Her heart began to beat faster. She opened it. Inside was a driver's license with a photograph. The old man from earlier, the man in the worn-out clothes, the man whose groceries she had paid for with her last kobo. Below the photograph, a name, Chukwudio Konkwo, and in the various compartments, cash, lots of it. She pulled out the notes, her fingers trembling. Naira dollars. More naira? She counted quickly, her eyes widening with each new discovery. Over $1,000, several 100,000 naira, credit cards, debit cards, a corporate ID card with an address on a Minukano crescent. Kaidinma stood in the empty aisle, holding the wallet in both hands, and for a long moment she did not move. The first thought that came into her mind was sharp and clear and undeniable. This is my money, and more, much more. I could take what he owes me, just what he owes me, just the 12,500, and no one would know. No one would ever know. I could put the wallet back where I found it, or I could throw it away, or I could say I never saw it, and that money would be mine. My school fees, my transport, my mother's medicine, everything I need. The thought sat in her mind, heavy and tempting, spinning its web of justification. He doesn't know where he lost it. He probably doesn't even remember my face. He's rich. Look at this ID. Look at this address. He won't miss a few thousand naira. He probably won't even miss the whole wallet. People like him, they have insurance, they have backup cards, they have money in the bank. This is nothing to him, but to me too. Me, this is everything. Kaidinma's hand tightened around the wallet, everything. The word echoed in her mind, bouncing off the walls of her conscience, growing louder and louder until it became a roar. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped, because another thought came, quieter than the first, but stronger, deeper, coming from a place in her that she had almost forgotten existed. He called you my daughter. He looked at you like you were the first person who had seen him in years. He said God would bless you, and you took his money. You stole from him? After everything. Kaidinma closed her eyes. She thought about her father, about the way he had raised her to be honest, to be kind, to be the kind of person who could look at herself in the mirror and not flinch. She thought about what he would say if he could see her now, standing in a supermarket aisle, holding a stranger's fortune in her hands, tempted by the darkness that lived in every human heart. She thought about the old man's eyes, the way they had looked at her when she gave him her money, the gratitude there, the wonder, the hope. She thought about what it would mean to betray that, and then she made her choice. The thought of keeping the money lasted exactly 3 seconds. Kaidinma closed the wallet, tucked it carefully into her bag, and finished her closing duties with a heart that was suddenly lighter than it had been all evening. She would return it. Somehow, some way, she would find this man and give him back what was his, because the right thing, she was learning, was not always the easy thing, but it was always, always the thing that let you sleep at night. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, Kaidinma knew she would sleep well, the wallet, the waiting, the night. After finding the wallet was the longest Kaidinma had experienced in months. She lay on her mattress in the small room she rented in Karoo, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood, distant music from a nearby club, the bark of a dog, the hum of a generator from the house next door. The room was tiny, just big enough for her single bed, a small table, and a kerosene stove in the corner. The walls were unpainted, the floor was bare concrete, and the single window looked out onto a narrow alley where her landlord's family dumped their waste. But it was hers. She paid for it with her own money, and that meant something. Beside her bed, on the small table where she kept her Bible and a photograph of her father, sat the wallet. She had placed it there as soon as she got home, as if giving it a place of honor would somehow lessen the weight of its presence. But the weight remained. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the money inside the crisp Naira notes, the foreign dollars, the cards that represented a life so different from her own. Tomorrow, she told herself, tomorrow I will return it. But tomorrow came, and with it came the chaos of another day at Ebiano supermarket. Friday morning began badly and got worse. Kaidinma woke up late. Her phone alarm had failed to go off, or perhaps she had slept through it and had to rush through her morning routine without her usual devotion time. She splashed water on her face, threw on her uniform, and ran for the bus, arriving at the supermarket just as her shift was supposed to start. Her supervisor, Madame Grace, was waiting for her at the time clock. "You're late," Madame Grace said, her voice flat. She was a solid woman in her 50s, with braided hair and the kind of face that rarely smiled. 5 minutes, that's coming out of your pay." "Yes, madam, I'm sorry, madam. Sorry doesn't put money in the till. Get to your station. We have a big delivery coming in today, and I need..." Everyone on deck. The day that followed was a blur of activity. A truck arrived at 9 a.m. with a massive shipment of goods, canned foods, beverages, toiletries, cleaning supplies. All the cashiers were pressed into service to help unload, stock shelves, and check inventory. Kaidinma worked alongside the others, lifting boxes, counting items, checking expiry dates, her arms aching and her back protesting with every movement. By noon, she was exhausted. By 3 p.m., she was running on pure adrenaline and the small packet of biscuits she had managed to sneak during her 10-minute break. By 6 p.m., her feet had gone numb and her mind was a fog of fatigue. Through it all, the wallet sat in her bag, tucked into the small compartment beneath her purse, waiting. Every time she had a spare moment, every lull in the customer queue, every brief pause between tasks, she thought about it. She thought about the address on the ID card, Aminu Kano Crescent, Woo's 2. She thought about the name, Chukwudio Konkwo. She thought about the face of the old man, the way his eyes had lit up when she said good. Evening, sir. I'll go tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow is Saturday. I'll go first thing in the morning. But tomorrow, as always, had its own plans. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, the harmattan haze softening the edges of the city, turning the rising sun into a pale orange disk in the sky. Kaidinma woke early before her alarm, filled with a sense of purpose that she hadn't felt in days. She washed quickly, using water from the small bucket she kept in her room, then stood before her tiny mirror, considering her wardrobe with a new kind of attention. What did one wear to return a wallet to a stranger? She owned 3 dresses: the blue Ankara print she had bought for her cousin's wedding 2 years ago, a simple black shift dress that was starting to fray at the hem, and a green wrapper and blouse set that her mother had sent from Enugu. She also had 2 skirts, 3 blouses, and a pair of black trousers that she wore for special occasions. After much consideration, she chose the blue Ankara. It was her best dress, the one that made her feel like someone, like a girl with a future, not just a cashier at Ebbiano supermarket. She paired it with her only pair of decent shoes, black flats, slightly scuffed but clean, and a small handbag that matched, standing before the mirror. She barely recognized herself. "You look like a proper lady," her mother would say, "like someone going places." Kaidinma smiled at her reflection, then reached for the wallet on her bedside table. She tucked it carefully into her handbag, said a quick prayer, and stepped out into the morning. The journey to Aminukano Crescent took over an hour. First, a danfo from Karoo to Jabi, crammed with passengers and their market goods, the conductor hanging out the door and shouting, "Jabi, Jabi, move forward." At every junction, then a taxi from Jabi to Woos because she wasn't sure which bus would take her to the right street. The taxi driver, a talkative man in his 40s with a missing front tooth, tried to engage her in conversation, but Kaidinma was too nervous to respond beyond monosyllables. "You sure you know where you going?" the driver asked as they approached Aminukano Crescent. "This area expensive, oh, plenty big men here. You working for somebody?" "I'm visiting someone," Kaidinma said, which was true enough. The driver shrugged and pulled over at the corner she indicated. 2,500 naira. Kaidinma's eyes widened. 2,500? But the meter? "Madam, no meter in this taxi. You agree to the price before we start, 2,500. There was no point arguing. She paid him, her heart aching at the loss, and stepped out onto the street. And then she looked up. The building stood before her like something from a dream. It was a tower of glass and steel, rising 12 stories into the pale blue sky. The ground floor was all marble and chrome, with enormous glass doors that slid open silently as people approached. A fountain stood in the forecourt, water dancing in elegant arcs, surrounded by well-manicured flowers and lush green grass. Flags flew. From poles near the entrance, the Nigerian flag, another flag she didn't recognize, and a third with a logo she had never seen before. Above the main entrance, in bold gold letters, was a sign: Okonkwo Group Oil and Gas, Real Estate, Shipping, Investments. Kaidinma's mouth fell open. She stood on the pavement, staring at the building, her handbag clutched to her chest, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. This was not an office. This was an empire. This was the kind of place where decisions were made that affected thousands of lives, where millions of naira changed hands every day, where the people who worked here drove cars that cost more than her entire village. And somewhere inside that building was the old man from the supermarket, the man in the worn-out clothes, the man whose bread and milk she had paid for with her last kobo. "Are you sure this is the place?" she had asked the taxi driver. "Madame Na, the address you give me." Oh, Kaidinma took a deep breath, then another. Her legs felt strange, like they belonged to someone else, like they might give way at any moment. "You can do this," she told herself. "You came here to do the right thing. Just walk in, give him the wallet, leave, that's all." She squared her shoulders, clutched her handbag tighter, and walked toward the gate. The security checkpoint was more intimidating than she had anticipated. 2 guards stood at the entrance, both in crisp navy uniforms with gold badges and holstered weapons at their hips. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head and the patient expression of someone who had seen every kind of visitor imaginable, stepped forward as she approached. "Good morning, Ma. Can I help you?" His tone was polite but firm, his eyes scanning her with professional efficiency, taking in her blue Ankara dress, her scuffed flats, her nervous expression, her cheap handbag. I'm looking for someone, Kaidinma managed. Mr. Chukwudi Okonkwo. The guard's eyebrows rose slightly, just slightly, but enough for Kaidinma to notice. Do you have an appointment, Ma? No, but I have something of his. He lost it at the supermarket where I work. I found it and I need to return it. The guard studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Wait here, Ma. Let me call inside. He stepped into the guardhouse and spoke into a radio. Kaidinma couldn't hear what he said, but she saw the other guard glance at her with renewed interest. She looked away, pretending to study the fountain, her heart pounding in her chest. A few minutes later, the first guard returned. You can go in, Ma. Take the main entrance. The receptionist will direct you. Thank you, Kaidinma whispered. Thank you so much. She walked through the gates, past the fountain, toward the gleaming glass doors. They slid open silently as she approached, releasing a blast of cold air that raised goosebumps on her arms. The lobby was like nothing she had ever seen. Marble floors stretched in every direction, polished to a mirror shine. A chandelier hung from the high ceiling, thousands of crystals catching the light and throwing rainbows across the walls. Plush leather seating areas dotted the space, occupied by well-dressed people who spoke into phones or tapped at laptops. A coffee bar stood in one corner, staffed by a barista in a crisp white shirt, and dominating the center of the lobby was a massive reception desk, curved and gleaming, behind which sat three women in sharp corporate wear. Kaidinma walked toward the desk on legs that felt like jelly. The nearest receptionist looked up as she approached. She was young, probably not much older than Kaidinma, but her makeup was perfect, her hair was professionally styled, and her suit looked like it had been tailored specifically for her. Her smile was professional and distant. Good morning, welcome to Okonkwo Group. How may I help you? I'm looking for someone, Kaidinma said. Mr. Chukwudi Okonkwo. The receptionist's smile faltered slightly. Do you have an appointment, Ma? No, but I have something of his. He lost his wallet. I found it and I need to return it. Something shifted in the receptionist's expression. The professional distance remained, but a flicker of curiosity appeared in her eyes. May I see the wallet, please? Kaidinma opened her handbag and pulled it out. The receptionist examined it, not opening it, just looking at the leather, the worn edges, the quality that was visible even beneath the signs of age. She nodded slowly. Please wait here. I need to make a call. She picked up a phone and spoke quietly, her eyes flicking toward Kaidinma. As she talked, Kaidinma stood at the desk, clutching her handbag, trying not to stare at the magnificence around her. After a moment, the receptionist hung up and smiled, a real smile this time, warmer than before. Someone will be down to escort you. Please have a seat. Kaidinma moved to one of the leather chairs and sat carefully, afraid that her cheap dress might somehow damage the expensive fabric. She watched the people coming and going, men in suits that probably cost more than a year of her salary, women in heels that clicked sharply against the marble floor, all of them moving with the confidence of people who belonged here. She did not belong here. She knew that, felt it in every fiber of her being. She was a cashier from Karoo, a girl whose mother sold groundnuts at a motor park, a student who could barely afford her school fees. This place was not for her. These people were not her people, but she was here, and she had something that belonged to one of them. 20 minutes passed. Kaidinma sat in the leather chair, watching the fountain in the forecourt through the glass doors, trying to calm her racing heart. Then a door to her left opened and a woman emerged. She was tall and elegant, dressed in a charcoal gray pantsuit with a white blouse underneath. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and her face was beautiful in a severe way, all sharp angles and perfect bone structure. She walked toward Kaidinma with the easy grace of someone who owned the space around her. Miss Nwakwo? Kaidinma stood quickly. Yes. I am Grace Okonkwo, Mr. Okonkwo's daughter. Please come with me. She turned without waiting for a response and walked back through the door she had come from. Kaidinma hurried after her, her flats squeaking against the marble floor. They entered a corridor that led away from the main lobby. Here, the walls were lined with artwork, paintings, and photographs that looked expensive, important. They passed offices where people sat at gleaming desks, typing or talking on phones. They passed a boardroom with a long mahogany table and portraits on the walls, serious-looking. Men in traditional attire, their faces staring down with the weight of history. Finally, they stopped before a set of double doors, polished wood with brass handles and a small plaque that reads simply, CEO Conquo Chairman or CEO Graco Conquo knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for a response. Father, she said, stepping aside, the young lady is here. And Kaidinma stepped through the doors into the office of the man she had met 2 days ago in a supermarket, the man whose bread and milk she had paid for, the man whose wallet had been sitting in her bag for 48 hours waiting to be returned. The office was enormous. It was larger than Kaidinma's entire apartment, larger than the staff canteen at Ibiano, larger than any room she had ever been in. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined one entire wall, offering a panoramic view of Abuja, the city spreading out below like a living map, the hills in the distance hazy with harmat and dust. A massive desk dominated. The center of the room, carved from dark wood and gleaming with polish bookshelves, lined another wall filled with leather-bound volumes and framed photographs. A seating area with plush sofas and armchairs occupied one corner, arranged around a low coffee table that held fresh flowers and a tray of bottled water. And behind the desk, rising as she entered, the old man. But he was transformed. He wore an agbada of cream and gold, the fabric rich and heavy, embroidered at the chest and sleeves with intricate patterns. A matching cap sat on his head at a jaunty angle. Gold rings glinted on his fingers. His face, still weathered, still lined with age, now wore an expression of calm authority, of power held lightly but never forgotten. He looked like a king, a patriarch, a man who had built something from nothing and watched it grow into an empire. And yet, when he saw her, his face broke into the same gentle smile from 2 days ago, the same warmth, the same wonder. "My daughter," he said, rising from his chair and coming around the desk. "You came." Kaidinma could barely speak. She stood in the doorway, frozen, her handbag clutched to her chest, her eyes wide. I found your wallet, sir," she managed, "at the supermarket after you left. I'm sorry I couldn't bring it earlier. I was working, and then yesterday was so busy, and she fumbled with her bag, pulled out the wallet, and held it out to him with trembling hands. He took it from her gently, as if it were something precious, something sacred. He looked at it for a long moment, turning it over in his hands, running his fingers across the worn leather. Then he looked up at her. "Do you know what is in this wallet, my daughter?" "Yes, sir, I saw it. I counted it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry, but when I found it, I had to see whose it was, and I saw the money, and you brought it back." "Yes, sir, all of it. Yes, sir." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a deep, genuine sound that filled the office, that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him, somewhere that had not laughed in a long time. "Sit down, my daughter. Please, sit." He gestured to the sofas in the seating area. Kaidinma walked on unsteady legs and sat on the edge of the most comfortable chair she had ever encountered. Mr. Okonkwo lowered himself into the chair across from her, still holding the wallet, still looking at her with that expression of wonder. Grace had disappeared, closing the doors. Softly behind her, they were alone. "Do you know who I am?" Mr. Okonkwo asked. "Mr. Chukwudi Okonkwo," Kaidinma said. "Your ID, I saw it." "Yes, but do you know what that means? Do you know what I do? Do you know how much money I have?" Kaidinma shook her head. "I am worth more than you can imagine, my daughter, more than you have ever seen. I own buildings, I own companies, I own land, I have money in banks in Switzerland, in London, in America. I have more than I will ever spend, more than my children will ever spend, more than their children will ever spend." He leaned forward, his eyes holding hers. "And yet on Thursday I stood in a supermarket in front of you, unable to pay for bread and milk, unable to pay for the simplest things. And you know why?" Kaidinma shook her head again. "Because I wanted to remember." He sat back, his gaze drifting to the windows, to the city spread out below. "Once a month I do this. I put on the oldest clothes I can find. I leave my wallet at home, or I did until this time when I forgot and brought it and lost it. I go to places where no one knows me, markets, supermarkets, bus stations. I walk among the people. I see how they live. I see how they are treated, and I remember." He looked back at her. "I remember where I came from. I remember what it was like to have nothing. I remember how people look at you when you have nothing, how they look through you, how they dismiss you, how they make you feel like you are less than human. His voice grew softer. The woman in the supermarket on Thursday, the one with the expensive clothes, the one who told me to leave, she did not see me. She saw my clothes, my worn-out sandals, my tired face. She did not see a person. She saw something to be dismissed. He paused. But you saw me. Kaidinma's eyes stung. She blinked rapidly, trying to keep the tears at bay. When you paid for my things, he continued, do you know what you did? You didn't just pay for bread and milk, you paid for a stranger. With money I could tell you needed, the cashier beside you, she warned you not to. I heard her, I heard everything, and still you did it. He leaned forward again, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. And then you found my wallet with more money than you probably make in a year, and you brought it back to a man you thought was poor, to a man who, for all you knew, had nothing to give you in return. Kaidinma could not hold back the tears any longer. They spilled down her cheeks, warm and silent. Sir, she whispered, it was just the right thing to do. The right thing, he smiled, and his smile was like the sun coming out. The right thing is rare, my daughter, rarer than oil, rarer than gold, rarer than anything money can buy. He reached into the wallet and pulled out a thick wad of Naira notes. He didn't count them. He simply held them out to her. This is for you. For what? You paid for your kindness, for your honesty. Kaidinma stared at the money. There was so much of it, far more than the 12,500 she had given him. Far more. I can't take that, sir, she said. I didn't come here for money. I came to return what was yours. I know. He did not withdraw his hand. That is why you must take it. She shook her head, tears still streaming down her face. Please, sir, I can't. It wouldn't be right. He looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he withdrew the money and placed it back in the wallet. As you wish, he said. But I will find another way to thank you. Tell me, my daughter, what is your name? Kaidinma Nwakwo. Kaidinma, a good name, a name that means God is good. And has he been good to you, Kaidinma? The question caught her off guard. She thought about her father's death, about her mother's struggles, about the tiny room in Karoo, the exhausting shifts at the supermarket, the constant worry about money, and yet here she was, in this magnificent office, talking to this magnificent man, alive, healthy, with a future still ahead of her. Yes, sir, she said. He has. Mr. Okonkwo nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. Tell me about yourself, Kaidinma. Why do you work at the supermarket? Are you not in school? I am, sir, National Open University, Business Administration, but I work to pay my fees. My father died 2 years ago. My mother sells ground nuts at the motor park in Enugu. It's not enough for everything. So I work, I save, I study when I can. And how much longer do you have in school? 2 more years, sir, maybe 3, depending on money. He nodded again, absorbing this information, filing it away in some mental ledger. Then he stood and walked to his desk. He pressed a button on the intercom. Grace. Please come in. The door opened almost immediately, and Grace appeared. She stood just inside the doorway, her expression attentive, waiting. Father? Grace, this is Kaidinma Nwakwo. She is going to be working with us. Kaidinma's heart stopped. Sir? Mr. Okonkwo turned to her, smiling. We are hiring administrative assistants in this company, Kaidinma. The salary is good, much better than what you make at the supermarket. The work is steady, the hours are regular, and you will have time for your studies. But, sir, I don't have a degree yet. I'm still in school. I'm not qualified to. You will finish your degree. I will pay for it the remaining years. You will work here during the day, and you will go to school in the evenings. Your salary will be yours to save, to send to your mother, to do with as you please. Your school fees will be handled separately. Kaidinma opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Grace was looking at her with a new expression, respect perhaps, or curiosity, or both. Mr. Okonkwo was beaming, his whole face lit with pleasure at his own generosity. Is that a yes? He asked gently. Yes, Kaidinma whispered, then louder. Yes, sir, yes, thank you, sir, thank you so much. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to. Say nothing. He extended his hand and she shook it. His grip was firm, warm, full of life. Say nothing, my daughter. Just come to work on Monday. Grace will handle the paperwork, and we will see what the future holds. Kaidinma walked out of the building an hour later into the bright Abuya sun. She had a new job, a paid-for education, a future. The city moved around her, cars honking, people hurrying, vendors calling out their wares, but she stood still, rooted to the spot, trying to absorb what had just happened. She thought about the old man in the worn-out clothes, about the woman in jail who had sneered at him, about the banker who had rolled his eyes, about Funmi who had called her foolish. She thought about how easy it would have been to keep the wallet, how easy it would have been to walk past him in the supermarket, how easy it would have been to let the cruelty of the world shape her into something hard and small and mean, but she hadn't. She had chosen kindness, she had chosen honesty, she had chosen to see a person when everyone else saw a problem, and now here she was. It is good, she thought, to have a pure heart, because you never know who is watching. You never know who might be wearing old clothes. You never know what might be waiting on the other side of a simple act of kindness. Kaidinma smiled, hailed a taxi, and began the journey home. Her heart was full, her future was bright. And somewhere in the office above, Chukwudi Okonkwo stood at his window, watching her small figure climb into the taxi, and gave thanks for the girl who had reminded him that kindness still lived in the world. A new beginning Monday morning arrived with the kind of brightness that seemed to promise good things. Kaidinma woke before her alarm, her heart already racing with anticipation. She had barely slept all weekend, her mind too full of what was to come, the new job, the new life, the impossible, unbelievable turn her fortunes had taken. She knelt beside her bed and prayed a longer prayer than usual, filled with thanksgiving and pleas for wisdom and strength. Then she dressed carefully in her best work clothes, the black trousers and a simple white blouse, pressed until the creases were sharp, and examined herself in the tiny mirror. You belong there, she told herself. He chose you. Now act like it. The journey to Aminukano Crescent felt different this time. The same Danfo, the same taxi, the same roads, but everything looked brighter, more hopeful. Even the notorious Abuya traffic seemed less frustrating. At the gate, the security guard recognized her and waved her through with a smile. Morning, Ma. Congratulations on the new job. Word traveled fast in this city. Grace was waiting for her in the lobby, looking as elegant as ever in a cream-colored power suit. She greeted Kaidinma with a warm smile and led her to the HR department on the second floor. Father speaks very highly of you, Grace said as they walked. That's rare. He doesn't usually take such an interest in new employees. I'm very grateful to him, Kaidinma replied. I still can't believe this is happening. Believe it. Grace stopped outside a door and turned to face her. Kaidinma, my father is a good judge of character. If he saw something in you, then there is something there. Don't let imposter syndrome make you forget that. The words settled into Kaidinma's heart like seeds planted in fertile ground. The HR formalities took most of the morning: contracts to read, forms to sign, policies to acknowledge. By lunchtime, Kaidinma was officially an administrative assistant at Okonkwo Group with a starting salary of 150,000 naira per month, more than 5 times what she had earned at Ebiano. She sat in the staff canteen, staring at her contract, and wept. The first few months were a whirlwind of learning. Kaidinma threw herself into the work with everything she had. She arrived early and stayed late. She asked questions, took notes, and absorbed everything like a sponge. The other administrative assistants, women who had been with the company for years, were initially wary of this young girl who had appeared out of nowhere with the chairman's personal blessing. But Kaidinma's humility and work ethic soon won them over. Her days were full, but her evenings belonged to her studies. True to his word, Mr. Okonkwo had arranged for her fees to be paid directly to the university. She no longer had to choose between buying textbooks and eating. She no longer had to study by candlelight to save electricity. She no longer had to worry for the first time. Since her father died, Kaidinma could breathe. She called her mother every Sunday without fail, and every Sunday her mother wept with joy. My daughter, Mamanwakwa would say, her voice cracking with emotion. My daughter, God has remembered us. Your father is smiling in heaven. Kaidinma would smile and wipe her own tears and give thanks. The sun 2 years passed like water through fingers. Kaidinma completed her degree with honors, graduating at the top of her class. Mr. Okonkwo attended the ceremony, sitting in the front row with Grace and several other family members. When Kaidinma's name was called, he stood and applauded louder than anyone. After the ceremony, he embraced her like a daughter. "I am proud of you," he said simply. "You have done well." She was now a full-time staff member at Okonkwo Group, promoted twice in 2 years, from administrative assistant to executive assistant to the head of operations. She had an office now small, but hers with a window that looked out over the city. She had a car, a modest Toyota, but hers that she used to visit her mother in Enugu once a month. She had savings, investments, a future. She had everything she had ever dreamed of, except love. Not that she was looking. Her focus had been on work, on building herself, on becoming someone her father would be proud of. Men had approached, colleagues, friends of friends, men at church, but none of them had stirred anything in her. She was waiting, she told herself, waiting for the right one. She didn't know that the right one was closer than she thought. It was Grace who extended the invitation. "Father is having a small dinner at the house on Saturday," she said one Friday afternoon, poking her head into Kaidinma's office. "Family only, plus a few close friends. He specifically asked me to invite you." Kaidinma's eyebrows rose. "Me? But I'm not family. I'm not even close friends. You're not just anything." Grace's voice was firm. "You're important to him. He considers you a daughter. So yes, you're invited. 7 o'clock. I'll send the address." The Okonkwo family home was in Asakuro, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Abuja. Kaidinma had driven past the area many times, marveling at the massive gates and sprawling compounds, never imagining she would one day enter one. But here she was on a Saturday evening, wearing a simple but elegant green dress she had bought for the occasion, pressing the intercom at the gate. The gate swung open, and she drove up a long driveway lined with palm trees. The house ahead was magnificent modern architecture with clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, warm light spilling out into the evening. Cars were parked in a designated area, expensive cars, the kind she still couldn't afford. Kaidinma took a deep breath, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, and stepped out. A steward met her at the door and led her inside. The interior was even more beautiful: high ceilings, tasteful art, comfortable furniture arranged for conversation. Voices came from a large living room to her left, and as she entered, several faces turned toward her. Mr. Okonkwo rose immediately, his face breaking into that familiar, warm smile. "Kaidinma, my daughter, you came." He crossed the room and embraced her, then held her at arm's length to look at her. "You look beautiful. Doesn't she look beautiful?" This last question was directed at the room in general. Murmurs of agreement followed. "Come, come, let me introduce you." He took her arm and led her around the room. There were aunts and uncles, cousins and family friends, business associates and their wives. Kaidinma smiled and shook hands and tried to remember names, overwhelmed by the attention. And then they reached the last person in the room. He was standing near the window, a glass of wine in his hand, looking out at the garden. He turned as they approached, and Kaidinma's breath caught in her throat. He was tall, taller than she had imagined, with his father's kind eyes and his sister's elegant features. He wore a simple dark shirt that highlighted the breadth of his shoulders, and his smile when he saw her was warm and genuine. "Kaidinma, this is my son," Mr. Okonkwo said. "Namdi, he just returned from London last week." "Namdi, this is Kaidinma, the young woman I've been telling you about." Namdi extended his hand. "The famous Kaidinma. My father never stops talking about you. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." His hand was warm, his grip firm. Kaidinma felt something flutter in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. "The pleasure is mine," she managed. "Welcome back to Nigeria." Something new. The dinner was exquisite: suya, spiced lamb, jollof rice cooked to perfection, plantains caramelized and sweet, followed by chin-chin and small chops, and more conversation than Kaidinma could process. But throughout the evening she was acutely aware of Namdi's presence. He was seated across from her at the long dining table, and several times she looked up to find him watching her. Each time he smiled, not the predatory smile of a man sizing up a woman, but something softer, more curious, more interested. After dinner, people drifted into different parts of the house, some to the living room for more drinks, some to the terrace for fresh air. Idinma found herself on the terrace, looking out at the lights of Abuya spread below. Mind if I join you? She turned. Namdi stood in the doorway, a bottle of water in each hand. Please. He came to stand beside her at the railing and offered her one of the bottles. I noticed you weren't drinking wine. I hope water is okay. It's perfect. Thank you. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking at the view. So, Namdi said finally, my father tells me you're the reason he still believes in humanity. Kaidinma laughed, surprised. That's a lot of pressure. I just returned his wallet. He told me the whole story, the supermarket, the way people treated him, you paying with your last money, finding the wallet and bringing it back even though you could have kept it. He shook his head slowly. Most people wouldn't have done that. Most people are good, Kaidinma said. They just get scared or distracted, or they convince themselves that the small wrong thing doesn't matter. And you? What do you convince yourself of? She thought about it, that the small right thing always matters, even when no one sees it. Namdi looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. You're different, he said quietly. I can see why my father likes you. They talked for hours that night about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Namdi had been in London for 7 years, studying law and then working for an international firm. But Nigeria had called him home, as it always called its children, and he had returned to take up a position in the family business. I miss the light, he said. London is gray for so much of the year. I miss the sun. I miss the heat. I miss the way people laugh here loud and full and unashamed. Kaidinma told him about her father, about the supermarket, about the long nights studying by candlelight. She told him things she hadn't told anyone, things that felt safe with him for reasons she couldn't explain. When she finally looked at her watch, it was past midnight. I should go, she said, startled. I've kept you out here much too long. I'm not complaining. He walked her to her car, and as she unlocked the door, he touched her arm gently. Kaidinma, I'd like to see you again, not at a family dinner, just you and me. Would that be okay? Her heart did that fluttering thing again. Yes, she said, I'd like that, falling. They started with coffee, then lunch, then dinners that stretched late into the night, conversations that covered everything and nothing, laughter that came easier with each passing day. Namdi was unlike any man Kaidinma had ever known. He was successful but not arrogant, confident but not boastful, kind in the small ways that mattered, remembering her favorite food, noticing when she was tired, sending messages just to say he was thinking of her. He didn't play games, didn't make her guess how he felt. He was open and honest and present, and Kaidinma found herself falling faster than she had ever imagined possible. 6 months after that first dinner, he took her to the same terrace where they had talked for hours, and he told her he loved her. I've never met anyone like you, he said, holding both her hands in his. You're real, you're good, you're everything I didn't know I was looking for. Kaidinma looked into his eyes, those kind eyes that reminded her so much of his father, and felt tears prick at her own. I love you too, she whispered. I think I have since that first night. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and the stars above Abuya seemed to shine a little brighter. Mr. Okonkwo was delighted. When Namdi told him about their relationship, the old man laughed with joy and pulled Kaidinma into a fierce hug. I knew it, he exclaimed. I knew it from the moment I saw you two together at that dinner. I said to myself, these two, they are meant for something, and I was right. Grace was equally thrilled. My brother has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you, she told Kaidinma. You've changed him, made him softer, happier. Thank you. The next year and a half was the happiest of Kaidinma's life. She and Namdi built a relationship on friendship and trust, and the kind of deep knowing that comes from truly seeing another person. They traveled together to Lagos, to Enugu to meet her mother, who cried and hugged Namdi, and immediately began planning a traditional wedding, to London to see where he had lived. They talked about the future marriage, children, a life built together. We have time, Namdi would say when she brought up wedding plans. I want to do this right. I want to give you everything you deserve. And Kaidinma, secure in his love, was happy to wait. The gift had happened on a Tuesday. Kaidinma had been feeling off for weeks, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix, queasy in the mornings, sensitive to smells that had never bothered her before. She had dismissed it as stress, as the remnants of a mild illness, as anything but what she secretly feared. But when her period was 2 weeks late, she knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. She bought a pregnancy test on her way home from work, her hands trembling as she paid. In the privacy of her bathroom, she took it, then sat on the edge of her bathtub, staring at the wall, waiting. 2 lines, positive. Kaidinma stared at the test for a long time, her mind blank with shock. Then the tears came, not of sadness, not exactly, but of overwhelm, of everything shifting, everything changing, everything becoming suddenly, terrifyingly real. She and Namdi had been careful, not careful enough, obviously, but careful. What would he say? What would his family say? What would her mother say, her mother, who had sacrificed so much, who had prayed so hard for her daughter to have a better life? Kaidinma curled up on her bed and cried until she had no tears left. She told Namdi the next evening. They were at his apartment, a beautiful place in Maitama with a view of the city. He had cooked for her a simple pasta dish, his specialty, and they had eaten on the balcony, watching the sun go down. After dinner, they moved to the sofa, and Kaidinma knew she couldn't wait any longer. Namdi, I need to tell you something. He looked at her, his expression shifting as he registered the seriousness in her voice. What is it? Are you okay? She took a deep breath. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Namdi stared at her. For a long, terrible moment he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't give any indication of what he was thinking. Then he reached for her hands. Are you okay? He asked. Are you healthy? Do you need to see a doctor? I'm fine. I'm okay. But Namdi, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. We were careful. I don't understand how he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Don't apologize, he murmured into her hair. Don't you dare apologize. This is not just your responsibility. It's ours, both of us. But your family, my family loves you. My father adores you. This will not change that. But the wedding we haven't even. We'll get married. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes fierce with conviction. We'll get married as soon as we can. Tomorrow, next week, whenever you want. I was always going to marry you, Kaidinma. This just moves the timeline up. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, tears of relief, of gratitude, of love so overwhelming she thought her heart might burst. I love you, she whispered. I love you so much. I love you too. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. And I love this baby, our baby. We're going to be a family. The wedding, the news was received exactly as Namdi had predicted. Mr. Okonkwo's initial surprise quickly gave way to joy. A grandchild, he exclaimed, embracing Kaidinma with tears in his eyes. I never thought I would live to see this day. Thank you, my daughter. Thank you. Grace was thrilled, immediately taking charge of wedding planning. Mum and Wakwo cried, but they were happy tears, tears of gratitude that her daughter had found love and security and a future. The wedding was held 3 months later, before Kaidinma's pregnancy began to show in ways that would invite comment. It was a beautiful ceremony, traditional rites in the morning, white wedding in the afternoon, reception that lasted well into the night. Kaidinma wore ivory lace, her growing belly hidden by the clever cut of the dress. Namdi wore a matching agbada, looking every inch the prince she had always known him to be. Mr. Okonkwo gave her away, his arm steady beneath her hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Be happy, my daughter, he whispered as he placed her hand in Namdi's. You deserve all the happiness in the world. The reception was held at the Okonkwo Group headquarters, the same building where Kaidinma had first walked in as a nervous girl with a found wallet. Now she entered as a bride, as family, as someone who belonged. Funmi was there, invited as a special guest. She hugged Kaidinma tightly, tears streaming down her face. I called you foolish, she whispered. Remember, I said your heart would finish you. But look at you now. Look at what your heart has brought you. Kaidinma smiled, thinking of that day in the supermarket. The old man in worn-out clothes, the cruel woman, the impatient banker, the moment when she had handed over her last money to a stranger. I wasn't foolish, she said gently. I just believed that kindness matters, even when no one is watching. Funmi shook her head, laughing through her tears. Ichidi, you have taught me something. You have really taught me something. Full circle, their son was born on a Thursday, the same day of the week Kaidinma had met Mr. Okonkwo. In the supermarket, they named him Chukwudi after his grandfather. The old man held his namesake with trembling hands, tears streaming down his weathered face. "You have given me the greatest gift," he whispered to Kaidinma, "greater than any money, any business, any success. You have given me a legacy." Kaidinma watched her father-in-law with his grandson and thought about the strange, winding path that had brought her here, the poverty, the struggle, the small act of kindness that had changed everything. She thought about the wallet still kept in Mr. Okonkwo's safe, a reminder of the day a poor girl taught a rich man that goodness still existed in the world. She thought about Namdi, asleep in the chair beside her bed, his hands still holding hers even in sleep. She thought about little Chukwudi, her son, his future stretching out before him like an endless road. And she thought about her own father, gone too soon, who had taught her that the right thing was always worth doing, even when it cost everything. "I did it, Daddy," she whispered into the quiet of the hospital room. "I made you proud." Years later, when Chukwudi was old enough to understand, Kaidinma would tell him the story. She would tell him about a supermarket and a lost wallet and a girl who gave away her last money to a stranger. She would tell him about a rich man in worn-out clothes and a kindness that changed two lives. She would tell him about a pure heart and the rewards it can bring, and she would end the story the same way every time. "So you see, my son, it is good to have a pure heart, because you never know who is watching. You never know who might be wearing old clothes. You never know what might be waiting on the other side of a simple act of kindness." Chukwudi would listen, his grandfather's eyes in his grandfather's face, and he would nod and promise to always be kind. And Kaidinma would look at her son, at her husband, at the life she had built from nothing but faith and goodness, and she would give thanks for the wallet, for the stranger, for the pure heart that had changed everything.